Hello, alright, you're listening to the Gritty Bowman, home of gritty bow hunting films, interviews, tall tales, and a wee bit of manly boasting.
I'm South Cox, and you're listening to The Gritty Bowman.
This week on Gritty Bowman, I sit down with Aaron Snyder and we talk about fieldcraft. Aaron shares some valuable bits of advice and some deep insights, such as the following.
It's good to stay alive, right? You don't want to die. So in the case of Colorado, you can fart and start a forest fire. But you have a gas tank, and then there's a line that runs out of that, and it has fuel in it, and it's flammable. I'm like, I would have had a fire going that they would have seen in D.C.
What is fieldcraft, you may ask?
Anytime you mention fieldcraft, people immediately think in snares and eating mushrooms, right? Well,
Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly.
Although snares and mushrooms are discussed briefly in this podcast, the focus is more on what you need to know to survive in a wilderness survival situation. We talk about how to start fires, how not to get lost, but also how to handle the situation if you do. We talk about Aaron Ralston and whether you should chop your arm off like he did, and if you do, how you should do it. In a moment of vulnerability, I confess that I carry 2 GPS units to which Aaron has a difficult time not saying something snarky. Hey, I'm easily lost. Of course, the podcast would not be complete without a few tangents, which this week include discussions about non-hunters and anti-hunters, photography, film, and our upcoming hunts this year.
If you like the show, please go to our website at grittybowman.com and subscribe to this podcast and tell your mates and pals about us. Do us a favour and please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. Send your questions and podcast ideas to grittybowman@gmail.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes, you can see the video version of this podcast on our website at www.grittybowman.com.
All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowman podcast. Aaron Snyder is back, and Today we are going to talk about fieldcraft, right?
And we almost had to do this podcast with Brian in bed because he's not an early riser.
No.
But yeah, fieldcraft.
I'm really not a big fan of lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And so I kind of go to bed and wake up whenever I naturally wake up. If I wake up with an alarm clock, I'm not that awake for a while.
Yeah. See, and I do the same thing, except I naturally wake up at like 3. So Frank the Tank and I were at the gym at 3:45, and it's conducive to getting a lot of things done, but long term it will probably catch up to me. It just hasn't yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand it. Probably.
I'm almost 40 though. No crow's feet yet.
That's good. I sleep so much, just naturally, that like when I get like 5 hours of sleep and I wake up, I'm so exhausted. And I can't imagine how guys how they can get up on so little sleep.
Yeah, and see, I get 5 hours. I'm like a spider monkey. That's a lot of sleep for me. Now, my wife, she can go the distance. She could sleep 24. I'm sure. Yeah. In fact, if there was a sleeping contest, I would enter her for extra cash.
Well, cool. So we got on this topic the other day. We were chatting on the phone. You had gone camping, right?
Yeah.
For the weekend. Well, which is not an abnormal activity for you. It's kind of like every other day. But you had gone up into the hills and did a little fishing and camping, and you ran into some people who maybe haven't spent a lot of time in the woods.
Yeah. And it's common, my wife included, before we met. She got lost a couple times, and she can get lost in a phone booth. But what we found was the one people, we came up and it was 3 ladies, and the one lady was like off in the pucker brush wandering around, and then the other 2 were just standing there, and they were like, and this happened more than once this weekend, but they're like, "Are you going down? Because we look like we know what we're doing." And I was like, "Yeah, where are you going?" And I'm always a smart ass. I'm like, "Where are you going?" They're like, "Oh, we're trying to go down." I'm like, "Well, what are you going that way for?" And they're like, "Is that not the way?" I'm like, "No, you don't want to go that way. That goes back to the way you came." And then, I'm like, "See, the trail's here and you're going And I'm like, that's the same direction you came from. I'm like, so just follow us. Well, we're beating feet down the trail, and admitting guilt here, I saw a place to cut trail, which you're not supposed to do. But I'm like, all right. So I just bombed down this creek trail. There's a trail by the creek. I get 300, 400, 500 yards down, and
this
and
is
one of the guys
through the woods, off trail to intercept the trail later on.
You've got switchbacks, and I remember, of course, this is highly dependent on this certain case of my memory, which probably isn't good. But I remember we crossed a huge creek on the way in. There's only one creek, and way up high, we hit the creek crossing, and I'm like, well, this has to end up like cuts like a mile off the trail down there. So I just start bombing down it, and then one of our guys had tried some new footwear on. He was going a little slower. He was blistered up. So I turned around after 300, 400, 500, 600 yards, and I'm like, oh crap, there's those 3 girls following us. And I'm like, dang. So
they're like,
the trail,
they must have looked at you and thought, he knows what he's doing.
Well, we got to the bottom, not the trail, but to where the trail was petered out. And I'm like, oh crap. So I just busted a right, knowing we would hit the trail. And well, then I'm thinking, did they follow us? So we're waiting on the trail, and I know I wouldn't want some dude to leave my wife stranded that followed him. So I'm like, okay, I'll go back in. I drop my pack and find them, and then you guys go up. Well, we never found them, and I'm like, when we get to the trailhead, we'll just wait and see if they make it. So they made it, and I walked over. I'm like, you guys good? I was like, I'm sorry about that. I didn't. I forgot you were following us. And they were like, yeah, we've just gotten into backpack hunting. And I'm like, oh, I say, so did you guys like take off with just like a t-shirt and a smile? And they started laughing. And I'm like, they're like, why do you ask? I was like, well, you guys were like 6 miles in, and you don't have a whole lot on your back, which I think is awesome. You guys are getting out in the woods, but you may want to take like a class at REI on maybe what to bring. And I was like, maybe a GPS, and don't just pack it, learn how to read it. Well, the same thing happened. I'm at the lake fishing, and I hiked in before my guide. And I'm wandering around the lake fishing, and I see this couple walk in, and, not a big deal. They're in there, and they're there for a few hours. Well, I see them kind of looking at me as I'm fishing, and I come back by them, and they're like, oh, you heading back? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm staying up here a few days. And, oh, okay. And they just stood there, and I walked 20 yards off, and I'm like, I think they're lost. So I went back. I'm like, are you guys trying to make it back to the truck? And they were like, and pride, right? They're like, the guy, he's like, yeah. And I was like, so when you came in, did you think about memorizing maybe the direction you came in? Because you're standing on the trail to go back. You just don't know it. And they were like, really? And I'm like, well, it's snow right now, but you hiked in, and then there's some big telltale signs here, like the footprints in the snow of where you walked in on. And they started laughing, and I explained to them which way to go. So anyway, that happened a couple other times. And it's not like I've never been, misplaced, but it is apparent in the hunting community as well when I'll try to teach a guy how to use a GPS or several other different survival pieces that maybe they have the pieces to survive, they don't know how to use them, or they don't have them at all, or panic is what generally kills people in a survival situation from what I've seen. They panic, they make bad decisions, they don't stop, they don't calm down, they don't think about it. Now you hit a certain level where not breaking my shoulder, pat myself on the back, where I'm at, it's going to have to be like a broken leg or a cut artery before I panic, because it's Colorado. I walk in one direction long enough, I'll at least be able to hit a road and hitchhike back, which has happened. Well, a lot of people don't think about that. They think I'm lost, I'm going to die, and not.
Let's be honest, Aaron. A lot of them don't know how to walk in a straight line.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
They don't have a compass. They don't know how to use it.
Yeah, and common sense. They don't think all creeks pretty much in the lower 48 are going to hit a road eventually. So barring injury, leaving injury out of it, if you just walk down a creek, stay calm, you've got water right there, so you're not going to get heat stroke and you're not going to run out of water. Just keep walking, you'll hit a road. Now, are you going to be away from the, your truck? Probably. Are you going to have to ask, swallow your pride and say, can you give me a ride back? I'm at this trailhead. But you're not going to die. You're going to get home.
Now, that's a little different if you're in a storm or an elements that are deadly.
Yes, and we'll touch on this, I'm sure, more as we talk about this, but most in hunting situations, guys have asked me before, like, and you see it on some of the websites, which I get a kick out of. You just cleaned your elk and you're shivering, potential hypothermia. What do you do? Well, hell, that's every season that happens. That doesn't even raise my heart. I mean, right. I'm shaking all the time. I get cold easy. But I know, for one, I can always build a fire. I have the things I need to build a fire. Unless injury comes into play, you're really hardly ever, in my opinion, in danger if you have common sense and in what's needed, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I've done some pretty dumb things. I mean, I'm not going to church it up. I've put myself in some pretty piss poor situations in bad weather, in lightning storms, to where it could have been potentially, dangerous. I mean, it could have been bad, but I'll build a fire. I'll just keep walking. I'm physically able enough to walk out if needed in a lot of cases, but I generally always have the gear to survive or to whatever, throughout the storm.
My buddies tease me all the time because I get lost all the time. Like if I use a GPS or a compass, I'm fine. If I just go off memory, I have a hard time. Even though I spend a lot of time in the wilderness, everything looks the same to me sometimes. But the first time I got lost, I think it was right when I first started. I was just out of college, and I was on a rifle hunt in Eastern Oregon, and I had gone down this trail
where everything looks the same, right?
Well, yeah, and I jump out and I hit this trail, and I'm only gonna walk down this trail for a couple of minutes and just peek down it real quick. So I leave my heavy jacket, everything in the truck, and it's not snowing. It had snowed for like a day, so there's a little bit of snow on the ground, about 6-8 inches of snow. So I leave everything in the truck except for my gun. So I got my gun and it's just some light jacket and stuff. And so I pop out on this trail and I start going down it. Well, I spot some elk and I start following these elk, and I'm sneaking through the trees and I'm following them. About 3 hours later, and the whole time I'm going in, I'm like, man, it's getting cold because the sun's going down. But I'm on these elk and I'm focused on getting one of these elk, and they keep going over one ridge and over the next, and I'm just following them, and then I'm like, don't worry, I don't have a GPS, compass, or anything, and it's starting to get really cold, but I'm cool because I got my tracks in the snow. So I follow them some more, and then the snow just starts coming down, just starts dumping.
Mm-hmm.
And within a couple of minutes, my tracks are gone. Are gone. And I don't know where I'm at. I'm completely lost. I paid no attention. Everything's covered in snow and looks the same to me. And now I'm freezing. I don't have a coat. I didn't bring anything to start a fire with.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to go, okay, this was really stupid.
I think we've all done exactly what you're talking about. A deer runs across the road. Let's follow it and forget everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I remember, hitting that spot where, okay, do I panic? What do I do here? And it took me a couple minutes to think about it, and I was like, okay, the whole time I was ascending, just a little bit, not a lot, because it's mostly flat, but there was a little bit of an incline. So I just started going down, and there was a creek I knew at the bottom, and if I hit that creek, then I knew I could walk it up or down, and eventually I'd hit a road. So I went through my mind. I was like, okay, that's my plan. Now I knew it could take all night, but I'd still be moving. I probably wouldn't freeze. It would be miserable, but I'd pull it off. Not to worry. It just sucked. And started hiking, and then lo and behold, my uncle who was there, he just started honking the horn and flashing the lights on the truck for like an hour. And when I wandered close, I could hear it faintly, and then I followed the sound to the road and got out of there. But it was a long. I mean, it was the first time I turned around. I'm like, oh. crap.
And you probably, from teaching survival courses myself, will talk to people that have been in the situation you're talking about. And it's amazing, each one of them describing the panic that they felt, which was like no other panic they'd felt before, and that their brain didn't work correctly. And generally, panic is what kills you in a survival situation, making piss poor choices because you're not thinking clearly. I mean, I've read stories about people being lost and then hiding when snowmobiles drove by, even though they were lost for no real reason. So your brain doesn't act correctly. Now, I haven't been, if I got anything from the military, it was the ability to hardly ever panic, especially in any situation, which is even to the point pissed off my friends, stuck on cliff, storm coming. Oh, I'm sure glad I brought my hat. I don't ever get too paranoid about it. But that comes with time. I mean, and then also that, people like in crazy survival situations, the will to live, like it's not something that can be taught. It's just bred in you. But the things that you can do, like we're talking about, is one, prepare with the equipment to make it out or stay the night or whatever. Physical fitness. If you can walk it out, that, more, I mean, if you have no idea where your camp is, but that, if I hike downhill, eventually I'm going to hit, in the case of, let's say, Colorado, I-70 or 285 or whatever main road, you're going to be a little embarrassed, and there'll probably maybe a little news story about this dumb hiker, but you're not going to die. So, physical fitness and prepping, and then common sense. And so let's talk about, maybe the gear that would be a good idea first, and then physical fitness. We probably don't need to talk about that because we beat that to death. But some of the gear you may need, whether it be for field repair or survival, just to elongate your hunt or stay prepared. And then we'll talk about some common sense things. I'm not going to go into what twigs and berries and mushrooms to eat, because if you're in that point, you're in deep, deep caca. But to basically either extend your hunt or get you home safe. And to be frank, I don't know what the name is. I don't know all the plants, trees, and plants and trees that you can eat. I know some. I know enough to get by. But as far as gear, if you go to any mountaineering store or any REI, they're going to have like the 10 essentials. And that's what they tell you need. It's a whistle and then a compass and a mirror and fire starter and all this other stuff. Well, my 10 essentials are a little bit different, but I would say, one, I never bring a whistle. Maybe it's a manly thing. Maybe two, it's because I forget. I don't know, but I don't ever bring a whistle. I do have a mirror that's on my compass, which is the idea. It's a signal mirror. Now, I can say that in 99.99% of the time that I've ever been misplaced, a mirror was the last thing on my mind. But I can say when I've been on search and rescues, you can see a mirror from a plane better than you can see anything shining. And that's a known fact. So a mirror is a good thing to have. But just step by step, before I fly around on too many tangents, you want a fire starter. So you want to be able to stay warm all the time. We've talked about trioxane, cotton balls, and Vaseline. Whatever tickles your fancy when it comes to fire starter, find the one that you like best, but a fire starter. With that, I bring a Bic lighter. I have some long burn matches that they sell at REI. They actually, I don't know, it's probably got 1.5 inches of like burn time. And then I bring a flint and steel. Now, the flint and steel, if you're going to be Jeremiah Johnson and start a fire with a flint and steel, I highly suggest you practice said task in multiple environments, starting with your backyard and some gasoline, because that ain't easy. And I've done it a lot. I mean, especially you get into like survival schools I've gone to where you have to start it basically like on that movie Alive with Tom Hanks, where you've got the bow and you're spinning it, and then you've got the groove, and then they suck. I mean, you might die of exhaustion trying to get one going unless you practice. It's kind of like math. It's a perishable skill. So when my daughter comes, we'll screw around and practice with a flint and steel starting a fire. But the big thing is a lot of people don't even know really how to start a fire. And you can read all about it. And then I find this all the time, guys on the net professing their faith and their knowledge on survival, but they're a solid 80 to 90 pounds overweight and they live in the city and they read a lot. That's great. But get out in the field and practice it. So in the case of Colorado, you can fart and start a forest fire. So I look as like a superstar all the time. I mean, I can start a fire anywhere, but then you get on the West Coast, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, British Columbia, you got to think ahead. So you want to know what to look for, what's dry in the wettest conditions. So pitch obviously is a good thing. Look for pitchy wood because that'll help burn. But if you're looking for, look for trees that are, like fallen over where the underside's going to be drier. Basically, you want to find the driest wood you possibly can. Well, you don't want to be, in the case of my wife and my daughter, where they start off the fire from too many movies and they throw chunks of wood in the size of an Nalgene. These do not start very easy, so you want to start with the smallest. You'll have like a tinder. Bouncing around. When I have to actually build a fire and pay attention, I generally get a big piece of bark if I can, or I clean out the ground. And then I put my tinder, my pitch, what's going to burn really well down, is the base to start my fire. And then I take tiny little twigs. A lot of times I'll take really dry grass or things like that and kind of mount it around the tinder as well. But take really small twigs. I generally do the teepee method where I kind of build a teepee around it. You can also do like the cabin, the log cabin, and build the tinder on the inside, the cabin around it. But the idea is you have wood, but you also have oxygen that's able to pass through because the oxygen helps ignite the fire. But you want to be able to bridge it up, so you want that to be pre-prepped and ready. And this is the biggest thing I've seen with people trying to build a fire. They'll get things started, and then they got to run around the woods trying to find wood. Have your tinder, your small twigs, your bigger twigs, everything lined out so you don't have to move, because you're also, once things get going, going to want to have to, bend over and start blowing in the dang thing to get it going. And one thing that I've started, it's kind of funny, which I've used, I'll grab it here. This is not part of my 10 essentials by any means, but I use this. It's a hurricane blower for my camera lens. Well, this little baby, it's like I just blow this on my tinder on the bottom to get it going, and the same thing with the wood stoves. Yeah. So I'm not going to blow until my teeth go numb. Yeah. I just sit there and I can pump water or pump oxygen in their air. And so if you have a camera gear, you have one of these. Anything that can create oxygen gets the fire going. I'm not going into great depths with this, but pre-plan when you're going to build a fire. Find the driest stuff you can, and then bridge up from something as small as noodle, like spaghetti noodles, yep, all the way up to something. I really generally don't get any bigger than my thumb when I'm getting the fire going, because once something the size of your thumb's going, you've got the makings for a bonfire, and that's what you want. Yeah. The trioxane, obviously, if you have that, it solves it. It makes things much easier. But if you don't have trioxane, or you don't have a way to ignite you don't have a way to skip the middleman of tinder. You're going to need to find the driest stuff you can, pitch, grass, things like that, to simulate paper or newspaper.
And so, regardless of what easy fire starter you have, everyone should probably practice making a fire in their backyard frequently. Make sure you know how to build a fire, because that's sort of, I'm a Boy Scout leader, and I'll take the boys out a couple times a month to go camping, and there's boys who build fires all the time because it's just fun. Those guys can build a wicked fire and build it fast. And then there's boys who have never struck a match before. Yeah. And they couldn't build a fire to save their life. And it takes a while to teach them and for them to learn. But even myself, you get out of the practice, and it can be, it can take you a little longer to do it.
Well, and you've probably seen on Facebook, everyone makes fun of me because I'm a fire building fool, because I get cold easy. I have, from fighting too much, loss of blood flow in my hands, and too much exposure for whatever, my feet get cold. And so, I'm not going to go into a bedding area and build a bonfire, but I mean, I build a fire when I'm cold. And so I'm a fire building fool. I can start one anywhere. So it's important to me. I always have the long burn matches, a Bic lighter, and a flint and steel with me. It's not that heavy. And then being able to use all of them. And you can start trioxane with the flint and steel immediately. I mean, spark it up. But again, probably try and start. You need to practice building a fire, not in your backyard, but in the woods, without all of that stuff, except maybe a Bic lighter. Obviously something to spark it, to get it going. But it is a depressing level of how many people don't know what to do when they get out there, and they really leave with a T-shirt and a smile, and they're just hope for the best.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had this experience in college with my buddy Chad, the one I went on the bear hunt with. We had gone fishing up in northern Idaho, off of the Snake. Well, not quite northern like you're northern, but it was freezing. It was kind of warm during the day, and we had gone down with T-shirts. Chad fell in and was wet from the waist down in these jeans. Well, we were heading back to leave, and we were about 10 miles from the road, and just hiking. And I had left the car lights on when we got there.
Yeah.
So the battery was totally dead. So there was 3 of us there, and Chad's wet from the waist down, and it gets below freeze, like -5 degrees, right? So -10. So we're up there, the sun's going down, and it's starting to get really cold, and we're not prepared for this. Just nothing. And I remember how stupid that was, because we had just bombed out of class, got down there, and we're fly fishing, and caught all these fish without a care in the world, went back to the car to go home before it got
life is
cold.
good.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, we're out there freezing. And it's this whole, how are we going to stay warm? Because there's no warmth in the car. None. I mean, without it on, we're freezing. I remember we had like 2 matches. And we hadn't really practiced building fires much. There was no flint and steel. And we couldn't get the fire started with the first match. So we got 1 match left. We're panicked, okay? But we did the whole thing. We got everything set up ahead of time. We found what we thought was bomb-proof tinder, and we were like, this has to light. And we got to be ready to take care of it to get it up. Well, thankfully, we managed to get the fire going. And then we got that thing into a giant bonfire. And still, even with that fire, we still froze. It's like one side was on fire and the other side was freezing.
Yeah.
But that was made all the difference, and we stayed there all night next to the fire, just trying to keep warm. And then till the forest ranger guy showed up in the middle of the night, pissed off because my wife called the police.
Oh man!
And he rolls up and he's like cussing us out because we're a bunch of college idiots, and he lost sleep over this. And last time he was there, he rolled up there. The guy was dead and froze to death that night, and he gave us this big long lecture all about it, and at least we could build a fire. We're sitting there going, by the skin of our teeth, we had 1 match.
Here's the thing with what you're talking about, which I get to hear all the time from people and teach classes. And this doesn't have to do with hunting as much as it's part of hunting, knowing it, but just it's good to stay alive, right? You don't want to die, whatever the situation may be. Well, I had met a couple during one of my classes, and they were telling me the story much like yours, and they had matches and lighters, but they didn't have anything to burn, right? And I'm like, you had a car, right? Well, the battery was dead. And I'm like, so in most cars, the fuel filter is like right under your seat. I'm explaining this, and I'm like, but you have a gas tank, and then there's a line that runs out of that, and it has fuel in it, and it's flammable. I'm like, I would have had a fire going that they would have seen in D.C. And they were like, well, what do you do? I'm like, you had some kind of a water bottle, right? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, well, the hose comes off and on, for God's sake. It's not like you ruin your car. Pull the hose off, drain some fuel. I mean, you can take your dipstick enough over and over and wipe it on a paper towel if needed. And they were like, well, we had the the owner's manual for the vehicle. I'm like, man, burn that like it was damned. I'm like, are you kidding me? I was like, I would have just soaked the owner's manual under the fuel. So, but it's common sense, which in today's day and age, is not common.
Right.
And I won't go on to 15,000 different stories of stuff I hear like this. And I was raised in the woods in a logging community, and this was like wiping your behind. It was second nature. I mean, that you just learn stuff like this. You learn how to change spark plugs, how, whatever, where now it doesn't happen. So my wife is I love her to death, but she would die. I mean, she's a tough woman, but she doesn't have the knowledge. Even living with a peckerwood like me, she doesn't have the knowledge base, because I may tell her that, but until you're stuck in that situation and you learn, like the sleeping pad where I didn't give her mine, she probably won't ever get it. And so to get off that subject, but learn how to build a fire and bring the stuff you need.
Well, and the thing is I have learned from this list of experiences. I've learned, what not to do and how much it can. The thing is sometimes when you learn, it can kill you. It's like, yes, I feel fortunate. I've had a lot of close calls, which have taught me a lot of things. But it would have been better had I learned a little bit earlier.
Yeah, fieldcraft.
Yeah.
And the one thing, Larry Bartlett with Pristine Ventures, he's the only guy I know that has as much time off to go in the field as I do, because his time off in the field is actually his job.
Yeah.
Guy's got mad fieldcraft. He's got skills for days in Alaska. Anyway, and he and I have talked about this a few times. He's the guy that makes the bomb bags, the game bags, and everything. Yeah. But he, bullets, right? You got a Leatherman, you got a bullet. You got a hell of a way to make a fire, right? It doesn't take too much. Now, obviously, as a kid, we burnt. My buddy caught his face on fire. We were dumb kids because we took fast burn or quick burn black powder, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And we were lighting stumps on fire, and it was the kind that it lit immediately. Basically burned his eyebrows off. So I learned if I'm going to build a fire out of black powder to make sure if it's fast or slow burn. But things like that, and that was one of the things that being resourceful, right? I mean, we were cooking fish on a fire this last trip. Not a big deal, but you build a fire, you can eat. I mean, if you have fish. Well, all the local Coloradans from Denver are watching us, and I packed in a pan. They're like 98 cents. They weigh not very much. And then we had 4 fish in the pan, and then like 10 fish. We just, made the V or whatever, and then the stick going across, and we just ran it through their heads, built a fire, kept the fire going, and flipped a stick. Well, that's common sense to me, and I eat fish all the time in the woods. But these people were just enamored, whatever, fascinated. They were like, you can only cook fish in an oven. What's going on? And I'm like, you don't have to have an oven or a stove. I mean, and I'll use my Primus stove. I'm like, but the idea for survival to cook fish or to actually eat what you're catching was just beyond them.
Yeah. I remember on a similar one of these other trips with Chad, we had gone up same place where we got ourselves stranded. Different trip, and we had to hike in the snow. There's a couple feet of snow, and it was we were more prepared with clothing and gear and everything. But we had this brilliant idea that we were gonna just live off what we ate, what we could catch from the river.
Yeah.
And we had thought ourselves pretty darn good fishermen and had been fishing this river, this stretch, for like 4 years now in college. So we do this brilliant thing where we hike in, and it's significant hiking because there's so much snow. We get in there, we set up our tents and everything, and we hustle down to the river because we're hungry, because we've got no food whatsoever. We dip our poles in, we don't catch anything. The next day, we don't catch anything. The third day, we are hungry, dude, and now we're starting to go, okay, do we hike out? Do we wimp out? But we're hungry. We catch, finally, just before dark, I catch this fish that's the biggest fish I've ever caught. This big rainbow trout. So in the past, we took these fish and we stuck them on a stick, and we just roast them over the fire because they're not that big, you know. Well, this fish is like this big around here and like a couple
steelhead.
feet. Yeah, he's gigantic. So I throw this thing. We try to stick it on a stick. We've got it stabbed through. We're trying to cook it on a rock. It's long story short, most of our meat ended up in the fire because it fell off this giant fish. We ate it anyway, but then I started researching how to cook fish in the wild, build a little basket, cook it over.
Yeah, I just say take a Willow's. Yeah.
Dude, instead I burn half of it and I'm eating raw and burnt fish. It was just...
Well, and these are the common sense things in fieldcraft, because anytime you mention fieldcraft, people immediately think in snares and eating mushrooms, right? Well,
Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly, which is good to know some of that. But applied fieldcraft in today's day and age, yeah, you take a willow, you make almost like a snowshoe. It's not overly difficult to do. You weave some stuff together, and then you just, it may not cook, and it's not a microwave, right? You're not going to eat in 5 seconds, but I mean, it'll take a minute. But, the other thing is, too, to make a happier environment, I take olive oil packets. Now, is that a survival situation? I buy them on Amazon, and I carry seasoning. James, my buddy James, is the one that kind of got me doing this, and Patrick here at Kafaru. So now we kill an animal, and we get everything, the back strap, we let the blood drain out or whatever. We take a Ziploc bag, we put olive oil in there, seasoning. If we don't have seasoning, if I have like top ramen, we'll take the top ramen seasoning, just shake it all up, let it sit overnight, and we're having backstrap for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or all the above the next day. Same with grouse. I always carry extra Ziploc bags, the olive oil, and the seasoning. The last thing I'm worried about is how to cook it, because I've done it so much. It's like cooking eggs at home. In fact, the wife laughs at me because I make probably better meals in the woods than I do at the house. But like with grouse, it's grouse season in Colorado during big game season. And marmots, I've eaten a ton of marmots. People are, oh my God, they actually, the little ones taste good. They taste kind of like pork. The big ones, not so much. They taste like crap. But you have that olive oil packet and seasoning. Not only are you sustaining yourself and you're getting protein in your body, you're going to have a lot of bleeps. I got to work on this. But it tastes good, especially like those fish, because they were brookies. We were catching 10 to 14-inch brookies. Yep. Pink meat, really, really dark meat. They were great, and I had 3 olive oil packets.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah.
So do you usually bring this is kind of a tangent, but when you are cooking back in the backcountry and you've got grouse or you've got fish, are you usually cooking them in a pan, or do you pack a pan? Do you not pack a pan unless you know you're going to be fishing like this weekend? Or
yeah, I only bring that pan when I know I'm going to be fishing. I do always have, not always, almost always have aluminum foil. Same principle. I actually, in the water bladder pocket, I just take the heavy duty aluminum foil. Yeah. It weighs less than an ounce, and I'll fold it up multiple times and leave it in there, because with grouse, I just take slices in the grouse, and not filleted, but it definitely opens it up. Yep. And then I'll take the olive oil. I mean, you got a lot of time on a backpack hunt, so got a little bit of time for me to cook, and I'll drip the olive oil in each slice. Yep. And throw the seasoning in there, and then you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Build a fire, put meat by fire. Fire cooks meat, eat meat. It's not really any more difficult than that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to. It can taste good. It's not like you have to eat grub worms and stuff. Mm-hmm. But either way, we're going off on a tangent. But common sense, building a fire, what the fire can be used for, not just warmth. In our case, we weren't in a survival situation. I packed too much food in anyway, but it's always good. I mean, I like to eat whatever I catch, I don't keep everything, but whatever I catch or kill.
But still, it is shocking to some folks then to see you cooking on a fire.
Well,
without, especially
James,
fish on a stick.
We watched a deer get killed on a hunt a couple years ago, and James and I are looking at each other, and he and I already know what happened. And what happened was the guy didn't pull the tenderloins out. So we weren't going to go down and tell him how to do it. So we just went down and took them and ate them. And I mean, it's funny because most people may not have thought of that or whatever. Maybe they would have, but I was like, I'm eating tenderloin tonight. So we went down and cut them out, and we cooked them that night and had them for for dinner. Most guys, a lot of guys will leave the tenderloins because they don't know how to pull them out or whatever.
Yeah. That's especially if you gutless method, it's a little harder to pull them out.
Yeah. And I mean, not that this is survival on the gutless method. If you do that, it's pretty simple. If you, if this is the vertebrae here, and then towards the back of the vertebrae, towards the butt, you have the guts, kind of the end of the gut bag. If you just push those aside and then reach up, the tenderloin's right there. You don't have to do, I've seen people reinvent the wheel on this. You just reach your hand up there, kind of push it down. You can actually, on the front portion, you can actually, if you're careful, push the gut bag down and then go through the spine, the vertebrae, and slice over, and that'll cut the connecting tissue on the front of it, or the part towards the head. Yeah. You kind of knead it and get it in there, and you can usually pull it off with your hand, get to the back of it. I usually take this hand, push everything out of the way, and then just kind of reef it off of there, and it doesn't take very long. It's relatively easy.
That's how we do it too.
Yeah, I mean, there's really only one way to get the tenderloin out correctly. I've seen many ways,
but a lot of
there's
guys,
really only
right. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
But they're the best camp meat, really. I mean, you could take other cuts, but the tenderloins over just on a stick and over the fire is pretty hard to beat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So we've got fired covered. So you want to be able to build a fire. The next thing would be probably equal importance is not as a compass and probably a GPS, but also being able to use the compass and the GPS and knowing how. You don't really need any type of fancy compass, in my opinion. You just need one that points north and does a couple other cool things. You don't, if you get one with a mirror, Primus or Brunton makes a pretty good one, but there's Silva, there's a bunch of different companies that make good ones. But then, learn how to use it. I got a guy texting us, he loves our podcast. Learning how to use the GPS and the compass. Now, I would say, much like a fire, you need to go out and practice said task in multiple different environments, above and beyond just orienteering, learning how to use a map and everything, but just general familiarization with your GPS and general familiarization with your compass. And one thing you'll learn is a lot of guys, like everyone I hunt with knows how to read an 8-digit grid coordinate and knows how to send one off to me, whether it be on my sat phone or my cell phone, because if they get an animal down, with my, the inner circle of group of guys I'm with, we all help out each other. So they send out an 8-digit grid, I plug it into my GPS, I plot it on my map, and I'm off to go find them.
You say 8-digit grid, you're talking latitude, longitude, elevation.
And we'll cover that maybe in different podcasts, but I use UTM, which is Universal Transmercator, because I was in the Army. There's degrees, minutes, degrees, minutes. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. But the bottom line is, if your GPS is, make sure everyone's reading the same thing, because if he's on one scale and he sends you that and then you're on another one, you're not going to be where he is at the end. There's no way around it. And what we've done with cell phone service the way it is now, to confirm with guys that we may not be really sure that they do know what they're doing, we'll snap a photo of what the screen says, and then we'll snap a photo of us pointing at the map where we are, to confirm that, poor guys, we're not going to be packing an elk out and then going finding our buddy. Obviously, technology, you're not going to have a cell phone all the time. But anyway, so GPS, compass, learn how to use it, fire starter. And then some of the other things I bring, a first aid kit, which we've talked about before. My first aid kit's pretty plain Jane. There's not a whole lot in it. I've got painkillers, some duct tape, leukotape, some sutures, which are generally used for fixing gear more than they are anything else. When you set up your first aid kit, what I would say is, if you're backpack hunting, do just enough to kill some pain, for one, some ibuprofen, obviously, for relax the muscles or whatever the case, and also kill pain. Cuts, make sure you can fix whatever cuts you have, whether it be a deep or whatever. After that type of stuff, fixing feet cuts and everything else, I generally don't go too crazy. I'm not bringing a whole lot of I have one. It's not quick clot, but it's a big combat gauze in case there is somebody that cuts themselves real bad. But I don't go too crazy on the first aid kit. I'm not saying that's what everyone should do. It's just in my experience, if a guy nicks a femoral artery, I mean, I'm not a ER trauma guy, but I know I need to pinch that thing off, and the chances of me doing that without causing further damage, I'm probably going to put a tourniquet on. So learn how to put on a tourniquet. Just basically learn some basic.
First aid.
I actually just posted a tab that a buddy of mine made for me that says medic kinda. Well, at least get to the medic kinda stage where you can fix your buddy. The big thing I've seen for backpack hunting is your feet. Are you going to die? No, but make sure you know how to take care of blisters and you have the stuff to fix those. And then in any crisis situation, you can get by enough to get.
It's ironic because some of these Boy Scouts that I'm with, I trust them to save my life more than I do a grown man with me out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Because they're learning this stuff. They're being pushed in some of these situations in scout camp where they're practicing these survival situations and learning this kind of stuff. And so many people just don't bother that they don't know. Like a tourniquet, it's pretty basic, and yet don't know how to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And you'll read some of the old, tighten the tourniquet, loosen it every 10 minutes. Don't do that shit. Just leave it. You're going to lose your limb. There's no way around it. I'm not a doctor, but I played one in a movie, right? But if you got to put a tourniquet on, you're probably going to lose that limb. Loosening it every 10 minutes isn't going to help. Maybe somebody that is a doctor can post up on here, but from what I've seen in the military, you got to put a tourniquet on. You're losing that arm or leg, and there's no really way around that. I've never been forced to deal with that in a hunting situation. I've seen pretty bad cuts from, Havalon knives and whatever knife stuff like that. I've seen broken legs, but nothing that was life-ending. Now, we all know of people that have fallen off cliffs. We had a guy that was at one of my seminars last year that fell off a cliff on a goat hunt and died. I don't know the whole story. I was in the territories when it happened. But very rarely do I talk to hunters each year where a group goes in and one thing happens that puts them in a life-threatening situation. It may be a discomfort situation, but not life-threatening. And what the gear that you take will help determine that level of discomfort in a survival situation. Either way, we'll keep talking about the gear and might have go ahead.
I was going to say, I had a very good friend who fell off a cliff, died. He's actually, it was when I lived in Colorado. I lived in Lakewood, not far from your place. And he had a goal to climb all the 14ers before he, before he reached 35 or something like that, 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so he only had 2 left before the end. He's getting really close to being finished. And it was toward the end of the season. There was a storm coming, and he had gone up on the mountain, and he was going to, he's like, he really knew better that he should turn around and go back, because of the weather and what was going on. But he wanted to meet that goal, and so he was pushing himself. So he's like, okay, well, I'll go. And I'll just be careful. We don't really know what happened. Long story short, though, he went up to the top, and then when he came back down, he got lost, and then fell off a cliff. And he couldn't see, and they were talking about how the storm, if you didn't get down from there, you were going to die from the storm anyway. So you had to get down. You couldn't just necessarily sit still.
Yeah.
But you can't see and you fall off a cliff. That's kind of. But what I took away from that, it was pretty tragic. And what I took away from that, though, was never let something like, that goat I want to kill or that sheep I want to get or, whatever it is that I'm pursuing, never let that goal blind my judgment. It's important to take some risk, to achieve what you're looking for, but take an educated risk.
I was just going to say the way that I word that is do not let your goal exceed your skill level, because I may be able to push my goal really far compared to someone else, and then somebody new to it, they may be able to push their goal 10% of what I could because their field craft and their physical fitness level, whatever the case may be. So yeah, don't let your, body write checks that your ass can't cash type of thing. Make sure that your ability to push it doesn't exceed your depth of knowledge.
Yeah.
On that note, we're going to take a break because I got to pee.
All right. Me too.
All right. Okay, we're back. We had a potty break. We've been running at the mouth of here a little bit, so I'm going to try and cut this down real quick. I always bring a headlamp, a way to obviously see, and I generally bring a backup as well. So you've got your fire starter, your GPS, that kind of a thing, compass, and then a headlamp is very important. Your first aid kit is something that you always want to have with you. To me, after that, it's kind of dependent upon the person. Those are the big things I feel that you should always have with you. In a lot of cases, and we were talking about this the other day on some other podcasts people have done, and other thought processes of different hunters, the ultralight mentality, the happy medium, and the heavy, who goes in with everything. I would say that if you're able to hike back out and you are okay with leaving rain gear, fire starter, and everything else to go home for the greater good of lightweight, do that only do that in an area that is very easy to get out of, because like Alaska, Northwest Territories, that's not really an option, right? You can't do that. You come down to Colorado or Washington or whatever, you can hike out. I think the big thing for people that need to weigh it out is an extra 3 pounds, leaving it out of the backpack, worth the risk of having to go home early, being in discomfort, whatever the case may be. I mean, you take a headlamp, a compass, a fire starter, whatever the first aid kit. It's not adding a whole lot of weight. Specifically mine, it's certainly under 3 pounds, and it gives me the ability to maybe stay or maybe help someone or help myself in a time of need for survival situations. I would say that the bigger thing, that the gear is important, but upping your field craft and your skill level and your fitness level is just as important as the gear, if not more important. Common sense. So learning how to read a map, terrain association, knowing how to plot something on a map, and knowing there's like catching features, knowing, okay, if I pass where I'm supposed to go, I'm going to hit a creek within 500 yards after that to know to turn around. Or if I'm lost, to be able to stop and do a terrain analysis, a terrain association, figure out where I am at that point in time. So even though I may still be lost, I have a relatively decent idea of where I am, so I can plot, okay, I think I'm here. There's a creek below me. It's got to be the one on the map. And then there's a road the creek runs into.
Yep.
Pretty common sense stuff, without going into too much depth. Learning to build a fire is important. And then general common sense, like where to set up your campsite. A lot of people put themselves in a bit of misery because they camped in a depression where all the water pools up rather than a bench. A lot of people talk about floorless. Oh, I set up my floorless shelter and I got soaked. And I can tell you, in all the times I've slept in a floorless shelter, I've never had water come in more than 3 inches from the edge. I also can tell you I have a lot of common sense when I set the damn tarp up, and I know not to put it in a depression. And so things like that. And then obviously other common sense things to not put yourself in a survival situation. If you're leaving for the day, this happened on a bear hunt in Washington, and if you're going to leave your gear in one place and then go on a stalk, cover your gear up if it's going to rain, because then you're going to come back to soaking wet gear. Common sense stuff like that. The basic idea of it's never happened to me before, it probably won't happen to me. I'm not saying prepare for everything so you're carrying 100 pounds of stuff, but you probably want to at least think ahead, without having the idea of I'll just walk out.
So what's your take on Aaron Ralston and the arm chopping?
Oh, I mean, I think he did the right thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've never been in that position where my arm was pinched, and I've only seen the movie and read parts of the book, right?
Yeah.
But to my knowledge, he fell down, his arm got pinched off. If it were me, I mean, he waited a good enough time to where no one was probably coming. I don't know even if someone was coming, if they would have found him. And he was going to die because, and this is something I left out about the water. And let's just talk about that now before we get to the Aaron Ralston situation. You can go 2 to 3 weeks without food. Now you're not going to be fully functional that entire time, but you can go quite a long time without food. So if some of the hypothetical situations I read online of guys saying this and this happened and what, there's guys I know go without food for a couple of days on a hunt and don't even think about it. They can. Now water, you don't want to go very long without water. A couple of days and you're going to die. So the other thing to think about is in the United States, you go to third world countries, you're probably going to get sick as can be. But it takes 2 weeks or so for beaver fever to set in. So drink up. I mean, if you need water and you can't find, you don't have a purification system, I'm not saying go drink elk piss, but I mean,
Yeah.
But the thing that I think when you're going to get water, if you can find a flowing creek, you don't want to get the water from the fastest flowing place, which a lot of people think that's where you want to get it. You actually want to find the calmest place after where it's flown really hard, because the bacteria settles down and you want to take your water off the top 3 inches because everything's settled lower. So the chances of getting sick are slimmer. Obviously you want to keep it as minimal chance as possible. So take it in I'm not saying go to a stagnant pool and take it off the top 3 inches, but if you can find a place where there's flowing water, once it's calm, get it off the top 3 inches, everything else settles toward the bottom. And then food, like I said, you got 2 weeks before you get sick. Drink up. I mean, if it's a survival situation, you're not going to die. But food, you can last quite a while without food. So if you think you can walk out in a day, drink the water, but don't try to start eating that's going to make you sick or something. I mean, you can last quite a while before you get, before you're so unable to walk. I mean, it takes a good bit of time.
Don't eat some dead rodent you found that has maggots in it.
Yeah, don't just start grabbing plants because there's plants that'll kill you. And then mushrooms that'll make you, as I talked about earlier, your I won't even say because you'll delete it anyway. But the so water, couple days you're gonna die. Food, couple 3 weeks you're gonna die. So and then try to choose the best spot to get water. In Aaron's situation, he was gonna die of dehydration.
So Aaron Ralston went out into a slot canyon. A rock fell down, smashed his arm. He was pinned inside this slot canyon. Nobody knew where he was. He hadn't told anybody before he left where he was going. His truck was a long way from where he was actually at. He was stuck there, and how many days he couldn't get loose from the rock.
It was a couple days, I think, wasn't it?
I think it was like 3 days.
Yeah. So he's about to die anyway, and he documented quite a bit of it. And he started talking about the color of his urination and the smell. The darker it gets and the more it smells, your body's going to shut down.
He drank his own urine.
Yeah.
And, he did a lot of things to try to survive and hope somebody could find him. But at that point, I mean, his arm was gone 2 days earlier.
Well, he gave himself a tourniquet.
Yeah.
Yeah, without meaning to.
And the only thing that I would have done different was, first of all, I tell someone where I'm going.
Yeah. And he didn't. They made it very clear in the movie he didn't tell anyone.
No, I mean, he admits he did it all the time.
Yeah, and the guy's a stud.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an animal. He's still climbing mountains today with one arm.
Telling people, though, telling people where you're at so that they can send in rescue or search or if they need to. I mean, that's just kind of basic stuff right there. Like you said, common sense. So take the time to do that. That's one thing. The other thing is I'd have just cut my arm off a lot earlier.
Yeah, 3 days is a long time.
I mean, he almost didn't make it out because he waited so long. He had no strength left. Organs were shutting down. He was too weak to go. I'd have cut it off earlier, and I would have cut it off at the elbow instead of breaking the bone.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that comes from gutting enough animals that it's a lot easier to cut through a joint than it is to try to half the bone in half.
I was just going to say, I think that we all do things off our past experiences. He wasn't a hunter. He was just a physical stud, right?
Yep.
So knowing at that point, if you cut around, you probably could have just pulled it off and detached it, if you got the tendons right from from deboning animals, that.
Yep.
I would have to say, because I have ADD alone, probably would have made that happen in the first 12 hours. Knowing that in a tourniquet situation, which is what he had, the limb was gone anyway. He may not have known that. I know lots of guys that are physical freaks that aren't overly maybe up on first aid or whatever the case may be. So, yeah. And, I mean, there's a lot of other survival situations that I've been either sent in on search and rescues or heard about that there's one, and I won't mention any names, that's happened here where someone got lost and they sent a large group of people in to find this guy. And I remember there was a group of mountaineering guys along with myself and a few others. And then there was a bunch of kind of rednecks that showed up. And it was funny. They were making fun of us for having GPSs and compasses, and you don't need that. And, well, almighty, we had to find them. They went out there, and it's cool. And coming from the way I was raised to now, I probably would have been making fun of guys like that too. But knowing what I know of now, you can't always know where you're at. Your sense of direction only takes you so far. Cotton, Carhartts, and things like that they'll work. You can get by, but more synthetic and clothing is better. And you always get the haters online. Well, what would have Hugh Glass or Jim Bridger, Jedediah Smith done? Well, yeah, you know what? They had the best that they could have back then. I'm assuming they would have used it now. And it's like those guys, I want to say, you know what? Are you driving a Model T or taking a rickshaw to work?
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're going to make fun of me because I have really cool gear, let's, kind of take a big step back and look at yourself, because I'm not Jeremiah Johnson or Jim Bridger. I have no problem putting my skills against anyone's in a survival situation. I'll do fine. But I want to have fun when I'm out there, and it's at my hands. I might as well use it, right? I'm not out there for suffering. I mean, I'm not out to suffer for the sake of suffering, to say I'm a badass and it really sucked. And I know a few guys that go out with a titanium spear tip and a smile on a backcountry hunt to brag about it, kind of a thing, to go really ultralight. That's just not me. I'm a happy medium guy.
I don't like to get cold. I like to enjoy my wilderness adventure.
Yeah, well, not only that, the same guy that's Mr. Billy Bad A for, he's come off the mountain pretty early in Colorado. He made it about 3 days. And then, so, yes, I'm sure the guy's tough enough, and on a bet he would have made it longer. But, I mean, when we go in on a 10-day hunt, it's not that I'm praying and hoping everything goes exactly right because I didn't bring enough gear to make it. I'm prepared for pretty much anything. And, if I need to hike out, I'll hike out to go by Copenhagen if I need to. But the idea is for me to stay in there the whole time in relative comfort and shoot some animals. Now, as far as the whole, trophy hunting, non-trophy hunting, I don't get into that. I just want to go out and have fun and shoot some stuff. And I've heard some guys say, like, I don't bring a headlamp. I'll just walk by the moonlight. Okay, well, the moon's not always bright, right? Like,
there can be
sometimes
clouds.
It's cloudy. Yeah, exactly.
Or it's just not out.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, again, don't listen to what other people are telling you, including me. Judge it off of what they say, but then judge it off of your own skills. If, you get lost in a phone booth like you, bring a GPS and mark a lot of spots. If you're like me, more of a happy medium, I mark camp.
Yeah.
Things, I mark the important spots.
I think that's really important. Like, you might laugh at me, but I bring 2 GPS everywhere.
Whatever it takes, I guess.
So I have my first one, and then I have a little tiny, old one that takes a couple batteries. Because I'm like, I know myself, and I don't want to spend time wandering around. I want to be hunting. And I've had a GPS go glitchy on me and not work. And it's just nice to have. So if one goes down, I pop out the other one. I still have my compass, I still have my map and all of that, but I'm out there to kill an animal and to be successful, bring it home. And that, I get lost pretty easy. GPS and me, we're like buddies,
Yeah.
and so having one that's reliable and having another one that's a backup, it also gives me a lot more confidence that I can just do whatever I want, go wherever I want, be as effective as I can be. But like you said, everybody has different weaknesses, different skills, and different levels of survival capability. Fitness being a big part of that, I think. So, and then common sense. But based on your experience level, like you said, that's how you prepare for the wilderness. Know yourself, know your limits.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure at the end of this, we've missed a ton of stuff in survival. It's an hour-long podcast, and we whipped it out. And if you have comments, chime in. But I know we've forgotten stuff, and I know we've perfectly skipped stuff because we're running out of time. But the biggest point I think you and I wanted to get across on this is know your limitations, be prepared for going in the woods. If you're not prepared, get yourself that way, practice the tasks needed, and try and have fun with it. Don't I think it's pretty admirable you're telling everyone you got to bring GPSs, because most guys are too tough and not in touch with their manhood to say, I suck and I get lost. I mean, in my case, I'm telling you, I get cold and I build a fire whenever I want to build a fire, because I don't like being cold. So you can call me not manly because my hands get cold, but it's from busting guys in the head. So take for what it's worth, but hands get cold and I have to build a fire. I mean, I've had guys be like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm building a fire.
I'm cold.
It's 45 degrees. And I'm like, and I can't pick my nose because I can't feel my fingers. So I'm going to build a fire.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, yes, physical fitness plays a huge part in any survival situation. So obviously stay fit, but, you don't want to learn everything from a book, but Google's a powerful thing. Look some stuff up, the stuff we miss,
Yeah, something that we didn't talk about was like deadfalls and snares and things like that, especially a deadfall where that's fairly easy to do.
Like a figure 4 deadfall for marmots, it works great. You've got one vertical stick, and then you got one, this is notched here, and one coming off at an angle, and then you've got another one here, which is your trigger, and it sticks out the other side. This is a piss poor example. But that trigger, you have a rock leaning against this angled piece, and when it hits that trigger, it unlocks off this stick. Anyway, the rock, in the end, there's a boulder on top of a marmot. It's easy to build. It takes like 5 minutes.
And you should learn how to do it. You
right.
Really should.
And
I mean,
there's There's multiple ways to build snares, and you don't need the predator bungee thing where it flies up in the air. Yeah, just take a wire, you build a little noose, find a game trail. Animal walks through, noose hits it, it catches itself, and it's pretty easy to catch a marmot, and you can eat a marmot. And I mean, I'm not saying go trap a bunch of marmots, but no game warden, I doubt, is going to give you a ticket for teaching your kid how to trap a marmot. The damn things need to die anyway. There's too many of them. And so just certain things like that, the squirrel trap, like from a tiny kid, the circular nooses around a tree where you build multiple nooses, squirrel tastes great. I mean, I eat it all the time. I mean, you may need to bring some wire to get it done, but, you put pine cones on a tree to get kind of at least a sense of direction for them to go. They're probably not going to run upside down if they don't have to. Put it on the top of the damn log, and they're going to run into a snare. Simple stuff like that. I hope to God you're never going to need that, but it's not going to hurt to learn, and it'll make you feel tougher. You'll feel manly. So you might as well try to do it.
And like you said, Google is a powerful tool. All of that stuff can be found there. Videos, YouTube. So
learn how to clean your animals too. I mean, it's not real difficult.
I have really enjoyed. I read Stephen Ranilla's book called Meat Eater, and his other one, American Buffalo, in Search of a Lost Icon, and his little adventures he talks about in there are pretty cool. Where he's cooking animals out in the field, snaring them, trapping them, and all that kind of stuff. Pretty cool stuff.
I haven't I think Steve Rinella is a great guy. I've met him at the shows. I don't, at risk of sounding like complete, since I do this every day, I generally don't read those, but I find it amazing. At least somebody's promoting it, because like we shot a grouse a few years ago, and my buddy's over there like a Rubik's Cube. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Stand on the wings and yank on the legs. It pops right out. He didn't know that, right? You know, if you stand on the wings of a grouse and yank on the legs, it kind of just takes care of itself. Rabbits are the same way. You know, I've cleaned a porcupine before. You got to start by the leg because of but you know, if you kill it and then you got to cook it whole with some hair, it probably won't taste as good. So learn how to clean the animals. Totally. In the case of a squirrel, it's not overly difficult. It's not a whole lot different than a deer, really. Well, I mean, it's a little easier. But.
And the part that fascinated me was how he makes it taste really good in the wilderness, you know, and things like burning the hair off with the guts in it, and then doing other things to cook the skin, to cook it inside of its own skin and things like that. It's kind of like, I mean, I'm all for tasty camp meat, you know, tasty meals in the backcountry. So, but like you said, gutting it, cleaning it. I told you how my brother got a squirrel, and then he spent like a couple of hours trying to skin it and stuff, and you were like, it's pretty easy, Brian.
That's funny. Well, I think raised where I was raised, and in learning what I did there as a kid. I mean, there wasn't like anything to do there other than go kill stuff. So we learned really early. I mean, we skipped school. My buddy Justin Spear, he was working for Les Schwab, but he and his brother, and we skipped school and we shot 3 blacktails, and we were dragging them out, and Sean had a heat stroke. Well, you kind of got to fess up. You skip school at that point, right? We threw him in a creek, but either way, that's how we were raised, you know, doing all that stuff, to where now it's kind of a lost art, which I think it's great Steve Rinella is promoting that. I mean, he seems like a really great guy, and from what Kenton at First Lights told me, the dude's he's a stud, you know what I mean? He's everything you want to be as far as promoting. And I think of people, not to get on another tangent, we need to hurry, but the amount of people that run into me and see a weapon and immediately think that is an asshole hunter, I hate you. And then 15 minutes later, after a conversation, they're like, oh, well, this is way different than I thought. And I think Steve Rinella is helping promote that, because the first thing I say is, hey, look, I didn't fly in here. We're both 8 miles in, or 6 or whatever. And it's not like I'm trophy hunting, and obviously, especially me, I'm certainly not trophy hunting. I'm just looking to get a bunch of meat that I eat, which is no different than you eating lean, 99% lean ground turkey. That animal has a soul as much as my elk does, right? Except your animal is slaughtered wholesale. So when you really break it down, at least I've earned my dinner, where you bought your dinner. And once you break it down to them like that, very calm, it's amazing. I bet hundreds of people I've turned from it, whether it was anti or mid-road, to I may start hunting. That sounds really cool, especially like physical fitness, like endurance extreme athletes. Yeah. The hunting thing with that struggle, like Fred, one of our buddies, he was a rock climber. Dude, he shot a 203-inch mule deer, his first deer, 8 miles in. And he was like, I was physically fit. So, you know, he explained the whole, you know, situation. And the dude's real methodical and calm. But like those fish, when we were cooking them, you tell Fred's a warrior. I mean, he was like dove right in to cook the fish. Like that's what he's about, eating what he catches and what he kills. And that's what we do it every weekend, every week. It's great.
It's just kind of rewarding. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to explain it, but I think you're right. Being able to articulate that to someone that you meet up there. I remember going into the Eagle Caps. There were more hikers by far than hunters we saw. Like, for every hunter we saw 50 hikers, and but getting to hang out with them, every single one of them talked to us for a long time about the elk we were packing out and what we did, and I think every single person that we talked to came out of there with a different opinion on what hunting is and what it's all about. So I think that's true. So let's wrap this baby up. Before we go, Aaron, I wanted you to tell folks what you're up to over the next couple of months. got anything Kifaru's working on? Anything that you guys, any big projects, any events you're planning to go to? What hunts you got? Anything you want to share that you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. I mean, my daughter comes in this Thursday. I think I finally decided the bow I'm going to shoot, which is a big thing because I've shot 19 different bows this year trying to figure out. I just kind of swore to myself, brand aside, I'm going to shoot what I want. Yeah. My buddy Phil drew a S9 sheep tag. So by the time when my daughter leaves, I got a scout for myself because I'm actually going to hunt for myself this year rather than help everyone a little bit. August 1st, well, probably the day before season, we're going into the worst wilderness that God put on the earth, in my opinion. It's horrible. I've got that tag, and then I'm going to probably, depending, I'll hunt for 10 to 12 days on a backpack hunt myself, help my buddy out a couple days in one of his units, fly to Idaho, hunt there, fly from Idaho to Washington for the governor's goat tag holder, probably bang out a bear. Depending, fly back here, help another buddy out on a goat in G15, help my buddies for the first season 501 rifle tag probably, or no, it's 500 rifle tag. Anyway, so I'm pretty much booked up through November. With all of that being aside, I'm not going to have time for what's going on here at Kifaru to go to the territories. Maybe they might fly me up for a week because we have a lot of things we've been working on for the last couple of years at Kifaru, which are about to come to fruition. Mm-hmm. If Patrick was here, he's a wordsmith, so he would know. But fruition, I think, is the word.
That's the good word. It's a good word.
Yeah. So we've been working on. I can't disclose it, but when we're ready to release it, I will definitely release it first here on the podcast. With one of the things we've been working on, which we've got it out to 18 different testers right now. We've had one guy come back with one part of it he didn't like. Everybody else has just been amazed by what it is and kind of how it worked without giving away what we've been working on. We've been working on a lot, but going off of what I like, what I thought people liked, what people do like, and trying to lump all that into one design. Since I've started at Kifaru 3 years ago, we've been taking notes. I mean, I'm a lot more focused on, okay, what I like may not be what you like and what the industry as a whole likes and trying to find a happy medium. So without running at the mouth anymore, I'll probably be able to release that here in a couple weeks. That is going to depend on how free my summer is, on how all this goes with the release and the timing. But yeah, I'm hopefully going to take, I'll be able to hunt mule deer here, get 2 elk here, go to Idaho and hunt elk. I probably won't do, I may go up to Idaho and hunt or whatever. My buddy Ryan's wife drew an Idaho tag. So basically, I'm going to be able to hunt for about 20 days myself, 25, and then probably another 60 I'll be in the field with other people.
And it's been a while since you've kind of chased your own hunts for yourself.
Well, I mean, and we've talked about this. A couple guys bash me in the industry. I don't kill them big enough, or enough animals are big enough. Well, I like to go on hunts and I like to help people. And so I end up, which last year I think I hunted 5 days for myself total. The rest of the time I was helping guys. And I'm very at peace with that. But this year, just because I'm not going to the territories and how the schedule worked out, I'll probably end up, getting to kill some stuff for more than normal. Where, I mean, there was, for about I always get to hunt and I always shoot 4 or 5 different animals. But when I actually really get to do a 10-day hunt where I'm hunting and not helping, it's really cool for me because I can hunt whichever way I want. I don't have to worry about babysitting, and I don't have to, I take whatever photos I want or hunt as hard as I want. So I'm pretty excited about that first 10 to 12-day trip. I'm excited even more probably about the governor's tag holder. It's my buddy John and Ben. Ben shot the governor's tag last year, and you saw photos. We were on that. Well, he bought the tag again for his best friend John, and I'm pretty pumped up about that one. We're going to go to Mount Baker and Lake Chelan is where we're going to focus, and hopefully we found a goat in there we think will go 55, 56 inches. Some people have said that have seen it. I think it's the world record. I don't know if it's quite that big, but it's a pig, and so hopefully,
Yeah,
our goal is
yeah.
53 plus with a bow, which would beat the current record, which is James. That hunt I was on with James has the current archery record. We're
That's
trying. We're gonna
awesome,
try.
dude.
Yeah, it'll
That's
be good.
awesome.
And John and Ben are great. John specifically is just talk about the most. He just won the Northwest Sniper Challenge in Carhartts and a T-shirt with a Kafaru hat. He just called
Just
me.
your
He's like,
style.
I mean, he crushed Sam Carlock. I can't remember the other guy, Brozovic, all these different snipers. He's just a cool, and he mows lawns. He owns a landscaping company for a living, but
Yeah.
he's literally, when we were on that goat hunt, we're climbing out like a 45-degree slope with heather. And we get to the top. He's like, wow, that was awesome. I'm like, that's one word for climbing out. Yeah, I was going to use a couple other 4-letter words, and we just took off. And he's like, dude, I'm kind of hungry. You want a sandwich? I'm like, yeah, dude, that's great. Never midnight.
Yeah.
We're going out. He's just happy. So he's a great guy.
That's cool. So, are you gonna maybe like film anything?
Probably just photos, dude. I'm not a big filmer.
I'd love to, see some film. Being
I
the
think-
film guy.
We're taking a guy with us on the goat hunt to film it.
Yeah.
It's weird how different people are with it, because I'm super photo guy. Love photos,
Yeah.
love watching them.
I
Those
am
short
not.
film.
I need to work on it big time. Like I've been working on it, and I still come back from these trips, and I'm like, my photos suck. So
Yeah,
something
well,
I
my
gotta-
film sucks.
I got to work on.
Well, and then the other big thing for me, the A7R2 for Sony has come out, and
Yep.
so we've pre-ordered one of those. I'm pretty pumped about that camera because that solves, for me on all these hunts. I really enjoy taking the photos and posting them for people to see on
You have gorgeous pictures.
Facebook. Well, and I do get an occasional PM of, dude, get off yourself about the photos. And I laugh because it's like, dude, I've posted 50 photos. One was of me. Obviously, I'm not posting selfies in the gym or in the field.
Dude.
I'm posting the trip, right?
The
So
way
there's
it
always
is-
haters.
The way it is nowadays, seriously, with the amount of selfies that go out, I can't see you being accused of being in love with yourself like that. I mean, it's pretty bad out there.
I don't post selfies. I did one with my wife or whatever, but I mean, my thing is I know I judge what I do off of what I want to see. And so when I watch people's photo adventures, I mean, I get pumped like, wow, look at that photo. And so that's what I do. I take the photo as it happened in my mind's eye or in my own eyes. I edit the photos according to that, and then I post them so people can join along in the adventure.
When
with
I'm doing
us.
film, it's kind of the same. I want people to feel like they were there with me, or
Yeah.
they got to walk that road, they got to cross that creek. I want them to feel like they gutted that animal too.
Yeah. Yeah, everything.
Quick, I'll tell you what we're up to. By the time this airs, the Northwest Mountain Challenge will be over. So I'm meeting Anthony and Ben up there in Idaho and Tamarack to go there. The Full Draw Film Tour, that thing's going on. They're touring all over, and they've got our film in it this year. So we're kind of stoked about that. And so they'll be down there in Boise. So we're heading down there to go to the Full Draw Film Tour Boise show. So that'll be fun. That'll be after this podcast goes up. We'll have already done that. So kind of excited for that. And then my daughter drew a tag. She's 11. She turns 12 a couple of days before opening day. But she drew an elk tag, a limited youth elk tag. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so I'm teaching her how to shoot a rifle and getting her all set up. She's got a bow, but not quite strong enough to pull back the poundage she needs to knock down an elk. But excited about that, and then just got a couple of elk hunts, and I drew a Colorado mule deer tag, which I want to talk to you about offline.
Yeah.
And see what you might know about the area that we drew. But it's going to be a good season. I'm excited for it. I got a bunch of films I'm working on, and Mark and I did some more gritty tips, which we're going to put a couple out here in the next couple of days. And those are just fun because we get to make fun of, or laugh about the hunting industry a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and I think, a recap, obviously a podcast recap of dumb things that happen throughout the year, because inevitably Ollie always end up in some goofy situation that's definitely note or story worthy.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing I was going to say, go ahead.
I was gonna say I've kept a list of Aaron Snyderisms. Now I have like an entire page or more.
Oh, well, see, I have to stay relatively clean because you're definitely, I'm more the anti. You're more the saint. So I hold back on them because my friends, even them, they're like, dude, where do you come up with these? The other day we were climbing the tower trail and I was hunched over. I was like, man, this thing's steeper than the back of my head. He looks at me, he's like, where did you even come up with that? And I'm like, dude, one of my instructors used to say that all the time. And I was like, I guess the back of his head is steep. I don't know. I just kept saying it. But yeah, I have, you should hunt with me. It's because since I'm never in a bad mood and there's always something like that coming out of my mouth, to a point, it lightens the mood. But it also, if somebody wants to be grumpy because he's tired, it'll either make him more grumpy or happy. And I found sometimes it makes him more grumpy. Like, how can you be happy? We haven't, whatever. I'm like, dude, it's better than sitting at my desk. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got to do. I'm going to publish that list. It's pretty. It makes me crack up every time. I think I'm. Gonna, I think
there'll be plenty more.
I think I might just take just all those clips and mash them together in one like 5-minute roll or 10-minute film. Just mash.
I've left some out, like harder than woodpecker lips. I got
that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another military term. You know what happened when I got to Fort Drum, when I was in processing, I was supposed to go to a different company, and this big dude walks in, and Ranger tabbed up, combat tab, everything, and his name was Sergeant Paul Lamont, and basically, like, my mentor, he came in, and he was like, a sergeant major, like, Sergeant Major, I'll take him. And I was listening, right, from Oregon, never left the state of Oregon. All of a sudden, I traveled all over. Now I'm in Fort Drum, rapid deployment unit, travel all over the world. And he's like, I'll make them harder than woodpecker lips. And I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? A 17-year-old kid, right, 18-year-old kid. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. But and that stuck with me ever, along with many others.
I figure a lot of these did come from the military, but still.
Construction in the Army, yeah.
Yeah, construction in the Army, redneck childhood, and the military. It's kind of a perfect blend of everything to create that. So,
yeah.
In fact, I texted my sister while we were on the phone, the one you said earlier, which cracked me up, dude. What was it? It was, dude, where do you come up with this stuff? Don't let your body write checks that your ass can't cover.
That came from that's Top Gun, man. Talk to me, Goose.
Did it really come from that?
He's talking to Maverick.
I've watched that like 20 times and didn't remember that. See, that's where you're special, Aaron. Those things just stick.
I can watch a movie and repeat it relatively quickly right after watching it if I like it. Like True Grit. I can repeat True Grit pretty quickly. But yeah, the bald guy, he's yelling at him, telling him he's going to Miramar, and he's like, you're writing checks, but he says your ass can't cash, but something like that. But that's where I got that was Top Gun.
Nice.
Anyhow.
All right, man.
All right.
Well,
cool.
Let's wrap it up. Thanks for this today, and have a good
Tuesday.
Weekend. Tuesday.
All right, man.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll talk to you soon enough.
Okay.
All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. Make sure to like us on Facebook and give us an honest review on iTunes. Good luck on your hunts and stay gritty.